Yeah, well, we've seen over sort of essentially since the election of Donald Trump, a number of attacks in places like El Paso, motivated by sort of a racial accelerationist ideology. So these are a group of people largely concentrated or centered on various communities on the internet who feel that a society is sort of barreling towards a race war based around conditions we see in the West, whether that's the United States, whether that's in Australia, whether that's in Europe. And they see themselves as part of an accelerationist collection of individuals who are basically pouring gas on the fire with the goal of sparking off something far more large and challenging to the security environment.
Yeah. You talk about, since the election of Donald Trump, has the divisiveness of politics in the United States played into this?
Definitely. I mean, I think we've seen across the spectrum things that were once considered to be extremely on the periphery of society have become mainstream platforms. Obviously, one of the most glaring examples of this is Fox News in the United States, part of the Murdoch media empire, pushing the Great Replacement theory on shows like Tucker Carlson. This is a theory that started on the extreme fringes and sort of the dark corners of the internet, and is now very much talked about in large segments of mainstream right-wing media.
And this is the fact that people of European descent will be replaced by minorities, blacks, Jews, and the list goes on. He was only 18. Are younger people more susceptible to this kind of rhetoric, or is it right across the board?
Well, I think the youth factor is a big part of this. I think we've seen this speed up since COVID. We know that this individual found himself, on particular web forums where these ideas were sort of front and center, particularly during the COVID lockdowns, when he was kind of searching for meaning, searching for explanations. And that really sort of sent him down this rabbit hole. And now we see, an entire generation who are brought up in this very much digital space, coming into conditions of sort of economic disparity, uncertain future. They're looking for answers. And these groups are oftentimes, and these movements are positioned to kind of give them those answers in many instances.
He had done quite a lot of research around events like the massacre in Christchurch in New Zealand and also the Norwegian massacre. Do these kind of events sort of prompt that kind of mass copycat attack?
Well, his manifesto is directly copies and pastes the Christchurch manifesto. So there's definitely a sort of a memification, a replication of symbols, ideas. We know he also daubed his weapon in symbols that relate to racial extremism. He put shout-outs to former individuals who'd engaged in these types of attacks in the past. So they're definitely building on each other. They're seeking to inspire themselves. They're seeking to inspire other attackers. And we can see a direct link between particularly this attack and the Christchurch attack.
He'd entered the mental health system a year ago, but then seemed to slip out of the authorities' attention. Is the system robust enough to detect these kind of cases? What needs to change to try and sort of help these people?
Well, I think the mental health side of things is important. Obviously, I haven't seen his profile, I haven't seen the particular file, so I can't comment directly on that. But I think this also speaks to the need for a more whole of society approach and response to this. So we don't just, for instance, handball it off to mental health officers or police officers to deal with this. This was an individual, as far as we can tell, who had gone through a period of isolation, wider social alienation, and had kind of slipped between the cracks. And we need to have wider social responses to this to be able to identify these types of issues. But we aren't just relying on, for instance, psychologists and police officers. We need to have the skills and tools in the wider society that can pick up on this and try and stop these kind of individuals getting pulled in and sucked into these very malevolent groups and ideologies.
Is this an issue that you're seeing outside of the United States?
Definitely. I mean, we have it here in Australia. Obviously, it's not as bad for a number of reasons that we're seeing in the over in Europe. Obviously, you mentioned the Norway attacker from 2013. So we've seen a sort of a series of events around this. Obviously, ones of the, sort of the larger scale, the mass shooting ones, tend to be rarer. But given the conditions that we're seeing, we will likely see more and more of these over the coming years. And we need to be prepared for that. We need to prepare ourselves as a society for that, to not overreact to that, but to also figure out ways and means that, again, as a whole of society, we start to try and address the conditions that lead to these people getting radicalized. There's always going to be the irredeemables. There's always going to be the ones that are the true believers. But for every one of those, there's going to be 10 who have slipped into these groups because of other conditions in their lives. And we need to be able to kind of try and give them a positive message to step away from that so we can prevent these types of things from happening. They're never going to fully be stopped, but we can definitely lower their likelihood significantly.
You know, and what you do see whenever there are discussions around the Black Lives Matter culture in the United States, or in any way trying to sort of balance the disparity there's been between black and white in America over the generations, politics divides it. Politics sort of plays it up, which, you know, until we see that stop, is this going to be a problem?
Well, I think political polarization, which you're alluding to there, is a major problem here. And we're seeing that, you know, again, in the United States, you know, the extremes of politics now seem to be the norm over there. The ability to reach across the aisle and come together around issues, the ability to have even just a shared reality. And certainly we have that here to an extent in Australia, although I would say it's to a much lesser degree. But I think we can look to the United States as an example of what not to do, and perhaps try and steer away from that before we end up, you know, in the same kind of position. You know, we here in Australia tend to take a lot of lead from the United States. The United States is often kind of out ahead of us, and I think we can look over there what's happening now and perhaps try and put resources, put community effort back into trying to sort of right the ship, as it were, here at home, and then hopefully they can also be doing that over there.
Ben, good to get your insights on this. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.